West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy with Chef Justice Putnam. Netrootsradio.com.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma fleur sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte.
Another day, another Supreme Court drama. The Guardian is reporting that lawyers who had business before the Supreme Court paid money to a top aide to Justice Clarence Thomas. The newspaper discovered the public Venmo account of one of Thomas's aides. The aide's account seemed to show that he received 7 payments in November and December of 2019 from lawyers who previously served as Thomas legal clerks. Upon further digging, The Guardian noted that it seemed that the purpose of each payment is listed as either Christmas party, Thomas Christmas party, CT Christmas party, or CT Xmas party, in an apparent reference to the justice's initials. Who are these folks enjoying these Christmas parties? Reportedly, there are people who have had successful business before the court, including someone who argued the affirmative action case, a former White House deputy counsel in the Trump administration, and the former Solicitor General of West Virginia, who had a key role in a case before the court that limited the EPA's ability to regulate greenhouse gases. One ethical expert did note that it was possible that the former clerks were paying their own party expenses and not expenses for Thomas. All of this comes on the heels of yet another explosive report by the New York Times about how Clarence Thomas gave unusual access to the Horatio Alger Association, a group of ultra-wealthy individuals who dole out scholarships. One thing that might help resolve this deluge is a formal code of conduct, which the Supreme Court currently does not have. The Senate Judiciary Committee is looking to do something about that. They are set to mark up and vote on Senator Sheldon Whitehouse's Supreme Court Ethics, Recusal, and Transparency Act, which would require the justices to adopt a code of conduct, among other things. And joining me now is Senator Sheldon Whitehouse of Rhode Island, a member of the Senate Judiciary Committee. Moments ago, he delivered a speech on the Senate floor about conservative activist Leonard Leo and his influence on the Supreme Court, Justice Samuel Alito specifically. And Senator Whitehouse, it's always great to see you. I just want to ask you to give us a condensed version of the speech that you just gave, if you would.
Well, the speech basically points out that we are in a very peculiar environment at the Supreme Court with multiple right-wing billionaires. By my count, we're up to 6 right-wing billionaires who are in various ways seeing to the care and feeding of so far 2 United States Supreme Court justices. I think this is the tip of an iceberg. A lot more investigation is required, but we're going to start work this coming week on getting a law passed to try to make this all more transparent and make clear where it's absolutely wrong and shouldn't be done at all, even if you have to disclose it later.
I mean, the thing about it, even the Venmo thing, we don't know what they were Venmoing for, what they were paying for these Christmas parties. But I think it's the perception that I think increasingly a lot of us have, and I'll just admit that I have, that what the Supreme Court, at least the conservative six, what they are is a little club with them and their billionaire friends and their former, clerks who work for some of these billionaire organizations that are coming in and they're all kikiing together, and then they just happen to get their way like 90% of the time in these court rulings. They're all working together. It's the lawyer that's arguing the case is on the board of the Heritage Foundation, and they're Leonard Leo's friend, and they all vacation together. It is like an oligarchy. It's like this little oligarchy of a few dozen people are making the rules for the rest of us, and we have to live with them. And it's not clear those rules are based on the Constitution. It might be based on this small group of rich people's preferences. Is there a law that you all could pass that would fix that? Because that's the perception a lot of people have.
I think the thing that will fix that is proper investigation. And of course, that's the last thing these billionaires want. We've heard from the one billionaire's lawyer that he won't answer our questions because it would violate separation of powers for us to ask this billionaire questions. It doesn't take much constitutional scholarship to know that separation of powers protects legislative branches of government from each other.
Right.
It doesn't have any effect on a billionaire unless this billionaire, in some weird way, thinks that he's now a fourth branch of government.
But aren't they? Aren't they, Senator? In a sense, aren't they a fourth branch of government?
Billionaires has somewhat taken over that role.
Yes.
I think that the billionaire influence over the Supreme Court is right now greater than the legal influence over the Supreme Court in cases in which the billionaires take an interest.
And this is the thing, we cannot know. Clarence Thomas has been a far right winger since he got on the court after being credibly accused of sexual harassment. So it's possible that he would have always ruled this way anyway. But the more you hear about him being taken on fancy trips and enjoying the good life and the lush life that he can't afford on whatever $272,000 that we're paying him as taxpayers, the more you wonder whether even if he was sort of steering this way anyway, he steers a little more, because the more he does what these billionaires want, the more goodies he gets, the more goodies his family gets. One of them is his mother's landlord. I can't imagine a city council person not being thrown off the city council for doing that sort of thing, yet our Supreme Court gets to do it.
The same guy paid his grandson, who he's raising, his grandnephews, who he's raising, tuition. They are taking them on private jets and pretending that the private jets are food, lodging, or entertainment, which are the only allowed exceptions. There are multiple layers to this, but you start with really bad behavior by these justices. And then you start with failures to report and follow the rules within the judiciary about those acts of bad behavior. And then you get to excuses they make about the bad behavior and the failure to report that are preposterous. Eye-rolling excuses like Alito claiming that an airplane is a facility. And then you get to the fact that they will never, ever, ever come clean about what the facts are. The most basic duty in any investigation to get the facts out, they defend against.
Let me ask you about your bill. I presume Democrats can pass it. Hopefully, somebody like a Manchin won't pull something, or a Kristen Sinema. But presuming you all can pass it, are you aware of a House majority, including a handful of these sort of, try to maybe get out of the swamp Republicans, that will pass it on the House side so that you can actually have a bill go to President Biden's desk?
I think a great deal depends on continuing investigation. The press, your fourth estate, is doing a masterful job at bringing out information. I think there's going to be a lot more information coming out in the next few weeks. So the story is going to continue to get worse for these justices. And Republicans are going to be in an increasingly difficult position saying, nothing to see here, folks, nothing to see here, folks, when even their own federal judges in their home states are rolling their eyes and saying, you got to be kidding me. We would never do this in my court.
Yeah. It is a conundrum. Hopefully, or it could also be a voting issue in 2024. We shall see. There are a lot of Senate races coming up. Senator Sheldon Whitehouse.
It is Thursday, the 13th of July of 2023, and you are in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. I am your chef de cuisine, Justice Putnam, Gunner, the English Bulldog, is our snoozing sous chef. Precious, the little Yorkie, is our door girl, and she will be seating you directly for our especially special daily special Metro Shrimp and Grits Thursdays. A little bit of jambalaya, a little bit of spice in your life, and it is just a little. Okay, well, the guy who's trying to keep from being thrown in jail continues, daring everyone in law enforcement to throw his ass in jail, and I wish they would. I don't know why this guy's not held in pretrial detention. I mean, is it because he hasn't been indicted yet? Because I gotta tell you, no bail, because this guy could skip. He doesn't care, and you need to shut him up. I guess maybe Al Capone had a First Amendment right to threaten the lives of DAs, prosecutors, their families, the judges, anybody. He had a constitutional right. He should have went in there and argued it. I bet he did. Actually, what's different about Al Capone and Trump is that Al Capone never admitted to his crimes in a court of law. Just saying. And I suppose what's-his-face Trump hasn't really done that either. But we'd like to see it. He won't ever admit that he's wrong. But he may just go ahead and admit to the fact that he committed crimes. He doesn't care. Because, hey, there is obviously two tiers of justice. I love how these people who get all the breaks in the world are whining that they are the victims. I've been getting all the breaks in my life, and all of a sudden other people are getting breaks. That's not fair. Okay. That person worked really hard to get where they are, and now they're trying to take the glow off of me. That's not fair. We used to not give positive reinforcement to that type of behavior, but now it's encouraged. Oh, yeah. Be a dick. Okay? Be an asshole. Biggest dick that you can be to everybody around you. The most arrogant, selfish. Oh, those are now admirable traits among men. Okay? I got to tell you, conservative women can only get away with it so far. Okay? They have their own little ways of, sticking the knife in to appease whatever it is that they need appeasing. Jeez, what a bunch of whiners. I mean, you listen to Hitler even. What a whiner. No wonder they're whining. Moms of Liberty are all pissed off that they're called a hate group. They're saying, you're putting targets on our backs. Really? Like the kind of way you put targets on the backs of teachers, librarians, etc., etc., etc. Okay? I am sorry. If you want to pretend that you're grassroots, you're going to have to take a little bit more heat than that, lady. Because, I'll remind folks once again, Nazi Frauen, Moms for Liberty are anything but grassroots. They are funded. Everything about them is funded, planned, and carried out by deep-pocket burgermeisters, which is a little redundant in that burgermeisters are, by definition, deep-pocketed. But I'm talking about billionaire burgermeisters in America, and maybe beyond. It's enough that they got the Kochs, the Petersons, the DeVosses. Did I say Petersons? I already said them. And, oh, God, who else? There's all sorts of them. Quite a few. Well, not all sorts, but quite a few. And it's starting to bug the hell out of me. Yep. Now, where did I see? I saw, this just was in passing, but I saw a little blurb that several or tens of thousands of book banning requests have been made by just about a half a dozen right-wing people, not organizations, people. They got a bot, apparently, doing a lot of the work for them and filing these complaints with school boards all across America. Get rid of these bugs. Get rid of TCM. Let us not know anything about our history of punching Nazis. Too much Nazi punching in those black and white movies from back in the day. Can't have that. Might make some Nazi kid afraid to be a Nazi. I feel bad about being a Nazi, Ma. We're going to go down to that school and set them straight, Jeter. Sinclair, or Upton Sinclair said it can't happen here, or was that Sinclair Lewis? Somebody said it can't happen here. And they had Sinclair in their name. But it can. Sinclair Lewis, he ran for governor. Did he? Was that Upton Sinclair? All of a sudden, I'm having a brain lock. Why is that? I'm not taking the Alzheimer's drug. No way. If there's going to be any nanobots in anything, it's going to be in that. Not getting it. Do I need it? I just need another cup of coffee, and it's sitting on the desk right next to me. I like to mix the personal with the public. Do I? Okay. We're just rambling here, and I guess I should get down to brass tacks. And that is, what are brass tacks? Well, I'll tell you. It's an idiom. That's what it is. But let us give you a rundown about what we have in store for you here at this salon that we call West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. And yes, billionaire burgermeisters who have had successful cases before the court, then made payments through a Venmo account of a Clarence Thomas aide. I'd like to know about Alito's aides now and how many Venmo accounts they pass through. Birthday parties. How many birthday parties a year can Clarence Thomas get? I think they meant that they're celebrating their successes like a birthday party. It is now the first day of a new world. Yep. And then there was a public hearing. There was a public hearing in, it was a Senate, because you wouldn't get this in the House. But Senate had a hearing in which a evangelical leader testified under oath, by the way, that evangelical leaders from all across the country conspired with the GOP Senate, House, and I guess the RNC. I believe that would be whatever funding arm to pass through payments, apparently, to then lobby? No, collude with the MAGA Supreme Court to overturn Roe v. Wade and any other number of things. The EPA ruling, all of it. No more voting rights for you. Okay. Can we maybe investigate that before it gets too late? On the rest of the menu in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, the second Oregon mayor resigned this week after racist and homophobic social media posts came to light. That's one way of putting it. But the second one, we reported on the first mayor, and he hadn't actually resigned when those racist and homophobic social media posts came to light. But now he has, since we reported, and now the second mayor this week has resigned. Austin has suspended its controversial partnership with the Texas Department of Public Safety to police the streets of the capital city. Just a reminder, the Texas Rangers, they're more of an investigative body. And the California State University system named its first Latina chancellor. Well, that is absolutely good news. And about time, too. After the break, we move to the chef's table, where a former Mozambique finance minister is extradited to the United States to face trial over a $2 billion scandal. And Chinese hackers breached State Department and other government email on the eve of the Blinken visit. Well, that's odd. I seem to recall just yesterday news about a whistleblower that was going to show that Biden and Hunter and the whole Biden crime family were in cahoots with the Chinese. And yet then he turns out to be a Chinese spy. Coincidence? All that and more on West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit. Radio.com. To the right of the page is the chat room link, monitored by Kelly Lincoln, though she's a bit busy right now being in Netroots Nation 23. That's right, Netroots Nation 23. And that is, of course, in Chicago, where they had tornadoes yesterday at O'Hare. Oh, my God. But actually, both Kelly and Ricky are in Chicago for Netroots Nation 23, so we look forward to their dispatches, so stay tuned. If you would like to then look across the page from that chat room link near the bottom of our homepage at netrootsradio.com, you'll see the Patreon page or the link to our Patreon page, and you know what to do. That's right. You click on that link and consider whether you'd like to become a recurring Patreon of Netroots Radio. Now, if you could afford an espresso-type coffee drink and you could afford to send those funds to us once a month, thereby buying us a coffee once a month, if you could send those funds to us, we're able to pool it with other people who've been buying coffee and pay our bills, or at least put a big chunk in the payment of those bills, because I got to tell you, we have to dip into our pockets, but that's okay, because this is not a hobby, it's not a vocation. It's almost like a duty, a responsibility. Anyway, we take what we do here quite seriously, even though it seems very jocular at times. Anyway, we do take it quite seriously, and we do thank you for your patronage in allowing us to fulfill our civic duties as the founders originally intended so many, many years ago. If you would like to follow Netroots Radio on Twitter, Mastodon, and Spoutable, you can do so at Netroots Radio. Tom's taking care of those. We, as Netroots Radio, are bugging out of Ellen's hell site. Damn him. But while we're still there, you can find us there, and Tom takes care of the social media feeds, so thank you, Tom. And he does a lot more, too, but that's one of the things that he's been doing, and we like that. Follow me on Twitter, Mastodon, and Spoutable at Justice Putnam. Now, I like to remind folks that I post the show notes and links diary, and that gets posted 10 minutes before showtime. Automatically, I just put it in a queue, and there it goes. And you can then read the actual articles that I am ripping off here. And you can find those show notes and links by following my social media feed. How about that? You can also follow the show on Twitter at Cookbook West, and please pick up podcasts by way of Spreaker, TuneIn, iHeart, YouTube, iTunes, etc., etc., etc. Not Stitcher anymore. SiriusXM got rid of Stitcher. Thanks. All right, this first offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy is out of the Seattle Times and by Austin De Dios. The mayor of Baker City in eastern Oregon announced his resignation late Tuesday after heated controversy over an offensive meme he posted last month that depicted 4 pride flags rearranged to form a swastika. Mayor Matt Diaz did not address the controversy when he resigned at a city council meeting, telling residents only that he would be moving out of the city of 10,000 people and therefore could no longer serve. Diaz is the second Oregon mayor to resign this week after Newport Mayor Dean Sawyer stepped down on Monday amid public outcry over hateful posts he made to a private Facebook group for retired or active law enforcement members. Diaz, who was appointed mayor in April, said he would remain in his role for the rest of the week. Well, thank you. As of July 17th, 2023, I will no longer be a Baker City working resident and therefore am ineligible to serve on the city council, Diaz said in another accent wholly made up by those responsible for Netroots Radio. I am grateful for the time here and the friendships I have built. After Diaz compared pride flags to Nazi symbolism, he told residents in a statement on June 20th that the post was meant to illustrate how the DEI, or woke ideology, is being propagandized and militantly forced on American society. Nothing says militant like having a bunch of Proud Boys showing up to beat up a bunch of drag queens reading to kids. He also said that he's not a Nazi sympathizer or supporter and added, I also hold no hate for those who choose a different lifestyle, religion, or sexual preference than my own. I just don't want to ram it down my throat. I made that last part up, but that's what he really means. Reached for comment, Diaz said his move had nothing to do with the controversy. Really? Since April, you decided that after I became mayor, I'm just going to hightail it out of town? He said he was leaving the city for a better paying job to support his wife and 4 children. I got to tell you, there's not much money out there in Baker. And that the search for work started weeks before the social media post. Diaz, a Navy veteran, ran the Get Smoked barbecue food cart in Baker City and was previously a pastor. In other words, itinerant. During the meeting, both supporters of Diaz and those calling for his resignation took to the podium. Baker City Council member Beverly Calder said residents sent at least a dozen letters requesting his resignation. Diaz took a seat as mayor after Calder was voted out of office April 11th. Mayors in Baker City are not elected by voters, but selected by city council members. Calder was removed from office after writing a letter to the editor of the Baker City Herald concerning a $1 million shortfall in the city's general fund, as reported by the Herald. Sawyer, the former Newport mayor, resigned July 10th and apologized to Newport residents for a series of hateful posts to a private police Facebook account saying, "My online persona has become too polarizing for me to continue," in another accent that's just totally made up. Sawyer described his posts as vile and dark, but only after he got caught. Associated Press staff bring us this next offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy Metro Shrimp and Grits Thursdays. A little bit of jambalaya, a little bit of spice in your life. Austin has suspended its controversial partnership with the Texas Department of Public Safety to police the streets of the capital city, an official announced. The program, aimed at helping fill staffing shortages and decrease 911 call response times, is being suspended. Earlier this week, a state trooper pointed a gun at a 10-year-old who exited a vehicle during a traffic stop on Sunday. And then on Monday, another state police officer shot a man in the arm after a car chase. The mayor and council members have raised concerns over recent events, said interim city manager Jesus Garza in a statement on Wednesday. That was yesterday. We must have absolute certainty that any solution we put in place maintains the trust and well-being of our community members, and that all law enforcement officers working to keep our city safe are on the same page when it comes to policing practices. The partnership began in March and was originally created by Austin Mayor Kirk Watson, Texas Governor Greg Abbott, and Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick. The program has decreased violent and gun crime and led to fewer traffic fatalities, shorter 911 call response times, and seizures of significant amounts of illicit drugs, including fentanyl and heroin, the city statement said. Watson did not immediately respond to a request for comment to specify which recent events led to the suspension of the program. The program was first suspended in May to reassign state police officers to the Texas-Mexican border and was restarted on July 2nd. Nick Anderson of the Washington Post brings us this final offering here in the Bistro Cafe part of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. California State University announced yesterday, Wednesday, that Mildred Garcia will become its next chancellor, the first Latina to lead the nation's largest public university system. Garcia, who has been president of the American Association of State Colleges and Universities since 2018, previously served for nearly 12 years as president of two campuses in the California state system, first in Dominguez Hills and then in Fullerton. In all, the system has 23 campuses from San Diego in the south to Humboldt in the north and nearly 460,000 students. It awards about 130,000 degrees a year. Nearly 40% of its undergraduates transfer from California community colleges. It is a consequential system, Garcia said in a telephone interview. I think Cal State could become a leader in the nation in how we become an educational laboratory. She said she wants to focus on ensuring solid funding for the system and growing public awareness of the importance of higher education. Garcia, who is the daughter of Puerto Ricans, was the first in her family to obtain a college degree. She holds an associate's degree from a New York community college, a bachelor's in business ed from Bernard M. Baruch College in the City University of New York system, and a master's in business ed from New York University. She also holds a master's and doctorate in higher education administration from Teachers College at Columbia. When you educate a first-generation, low-income person of color, you are transforming a family, and I can speak from experience, Garcia said. That's me. Public higher ed was my foundation. She starts on October 1st, succeeding the interim chancellor, Jolene Kuster. In early 2022, Joseph I. Castro resigned as chancellor amid allegations that he had mishandled sexual misconduct complaints leveled against a colleague when Castro was president of Fresno State University. All right, let us now go to our break, and when we get back from that break, we will go through weather from around the world, and we will finish up with the stories that we've curated for you today. You are listening to West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, and we will be right back.
You are listening to netrootsradio.com.
Please hang up and try again.
From a point at sea to the circles of your mind, a new force is at work for planetary transformation. New radio for a new Earth.
This is Take Two Movie Review. I'm Mike Friend. This week, Not Dialed Back. Plans for a fifth Indiana Jones movie go back to the 70s, when 4 sequels were negotiated after Raiders. With passing time and corporate changes, this one, Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny, is the first not conceived by Lucas or directed by Spielberg. Instead, directorial duties have fallen to James Mangold of Logan and Ford vs. Ferrari fame, and he and his 9-figure budget have done a good job wrapping the franchise. For villains, we're back to Nazis. This one opens in 1944 with Harrison Ford's character on a train full of Nazi loot, where we're introduced to an archaeological object said to facilitate time travel. More accurately, it's half the object. Fast forward 25 years and we find the combatants from the train, Indy, now a Columbia professor, and the Nazi officer, now working for NASA, globetrotting to find the other half. The quote-unquote former Nazi has some corrections in mind for the timeline vis-a-vis World War II. As expected, familiar characters appear, though the film doesn't seem weighed down by subplots to accommodate such appearances. New cast members include a dazzling Phoebe Waller-Bridge as Indy's goddaughter and actual daughter of Indy's colleague from the opening scene. Her character is that of an antiquities dealer of dubious ethics, but who's always on the right side when it counts, and Mads Mikkelsen, bringing off the Nazi Jürgen Voller with evil aplomb. Is Indiana Jones the Dial of Destiny an unintentional metaphor for recapturing past thrills? Maybe. Once again, we get chases, walks through caves, and we even see the whip in one scene, though it feels a bit forced. Even if it is that metaphor, though, it's a must-see for generations of fans. This has been Take Two Movie Review. I'm Mike Friend. Catch up with us at take2moviereview.com and feed us back on our channel on YouTube.
Hey there, Science Quickly listeners. I'm Talika Bose, Scientific American's senior multimedia editor. Today, we're bringing you something we're sure you'll like. A new episode from our podcast partners, The Lost Women of Science. Their fabulous show recounts the remarkable stories of groundbreaking women who never got the full recognition they deserved, until now. Today, they've brought us a fascinating story of a secret anatomist. Alessandra Giuliani lived in the 14th century. That was 500 years before women were admitted to any medical school in the world. So, Alessandra did what she had to do to practice medicine. She put on a man's tunic and kirtle, snuck into the medical amphitheater, and started dissecting cadavers.
There was a widely circulated story about this young girl, and the only way she could attend medical school in Italy at the time was to dress as a man.
I'm Katie Hafner, and this is Lost Women of Science from our inbox, a brand new series of mini episodes that you'll be hearing from now until, I'm not sure, maybe 2050 because our list of women lost to history is long. On a regular basis, we're going to give you a brief burst of one woman's story that came to us from you, our listeners. We're kicking off the series with an intriguing tip we received recently from Barbara Quick, a poet and novelist in the San Francisco Bay Area. She wanted to tell us about Alessandra Giuliani, a young woman who lived in Italy in the 14th century, doing something unheard of, studying medicine. If you don't find that stunning, consider this. Most medical schools in the United States didn't start admitting women until 500 years later, around 1900. And Harvard Medical School had its first female graduate soon after World War II. So when the story of Alessandra Giuliani floated into our inbox, we took notice. Alessandra was thought to be an anatomist, dissecting human cadavers to better understand the body's internal systems and organs, and she did it in disguise. Quick's novel, A Golden Web, is a fictional account of Alessandra's life and work. Lost Women of Science associate producer Mackenzie Tatanani spoke with Barbara.
Alessandra was just 19 years old when she died. And it just makes me realize what a brief life this was, how consequential, and how difficult to be someone as brilliant and precocious and determined as Alessandra was.
That's Barbara, telling the story as far as she knows it.
She lived, reputedly, 700 years ago in San Giovanni in Persiceto and also in Bologna.
Barbara tells me that she stumbled upon Alessandra's story serendipitously.
I found her by accident in the course of looking into the life and work of another female anatomist who lived in Bologna 400 years later. But what happened when I turned up in Bologna and started doing my library research there was that I found evidence of another female anatomist, Alessandra Giuliani, who died in the 1320s.
Barbara found evidence of Giuliani's existence during a visit to a library in the town of San Giovanni in Persiceto in northern Italy.
This librarian was able to let me examine these fantastic illuminated manuscripts of the time. And part of what they showed was the anatomy lessons given by Mondino de Luzzi. And I saw clearly a young woman who was cross-dressed, who was assisting at the lessons. And as I looked into it more, I found that there was a widely circulated story that was written in the 18th century about this young girl who pursued medical school. And the only way she could attend medical school in Italy at the time was to dress as a man.
Dressed as a man, Giuliani was believed to be a prosector, the person who does the cutting up of a cadaver during lecture demonstrations. Using a method of her own invention, she also challenged commonly held beliefs about the circulatory system.
For centuries, it was accepted as fact that blood passes from the right ventricle to the left ventricle of the heart through quote-unquote invisible pores in the septum. Everyone believed that the heart itself was not a muscle and did not have a pumping function. The thought was that blood simply passed through it, which of course is completely wrong. The 17th century British medical researcher William Harvey, also at the University of Padua, is credited with finally setting the record straight about how the pulmonary circulatory system actually works.
But
written records from the 18th century chronicle the life and accomplishments of Alessandra Giuliani, who reputedly carried out anatomical research that anticipated William Harvey's discoveries by some 300 years. She developed a special system of making melted wax that was dyed. She used two colors, red and blue, to model the circulatory system. If it hadn't been against the laws of the church and the government at the time for women to work in this capacity, many things would have changed and science would have progressed more quickly than it did.
Barbara Quick had reason to believe that the church burned Giuliani's work following her death, destroying nearly all traces of the young anatomist.
Somehow, if we had a time machine and could go back and give some kind of cloak of protection to Alessandra and her work, who knows what she would have accomplished.
Yet one question continues to nag at historians. Did Giuliani actually exist? Barbara Quick says, it's all a matter of choosing whose version of history you want to believe.
Well, the most strident naysayers that I encountered in Italy in the medical historical community were all males. And I just think it's just that, standard line about, a woman couldn't have possibly done this.
But as we've learned, it is more than possible that a woman did this. And we'll just keep on researching and digging up their stories because there are plenty to tell. As we like to say at Lost Women of Science, we're not mad, we're curious.
And if you know of a female scientist who's been lost to history, go to our website to send us an email at lostwomenofscience.org. You'll also find the phone number to our tip line. We love getting calls to the tip line. This episode of Lost Women of Science from Our Inbox was produced by Mackenzie Tatanani. Our sound engineer was Alex Sugiura. Lizzie Yunin composes our music. We get our funding from the Alfred P. Sloan Foundation and Schmidt Futures. PRX distributes us, and our publishing partner is Scientific American. This is Lost Women of Science, and I'm Katie Hafner.
Hi, I'm Tom Hartman, and since you're listening to netrootsradio.com, show your progressive side and go to the donate button on the bottom of the homepage. It's progressives like you who power Netroots Radio and keep the progressive message beaming everywhere 24 hours a day. Just go to our donate button at the bottom of netrootsradio.com. Thank you for keeping progressive radio at full power.
Can colleges have affirmative action admissions programs for rich white people? I'm Bill Newman, and this is the Civil Liberties Minute. A recent Supreme Court decision involving Harvard and the University of North Carolina struck down affirmative action, consideration of diversity as a factor in college admission decisions. Justice Gorsuch, part of the 6-3 majority, in his additional concurring opinion said that legacy admissions, applicants with relatives who are donors and alums, quote, undoubtedly benefit white and wealthy applicants the most. Justice Sotomayor, in her dissent, agreed with that. At highly selective colleges, legacy admissions make up between 4 and 23% of the first-year class. Indeed, at Cornell, Dartmouth, Notre Dame, and USC, legacy students outnumber black students. And only a very few colleges, MIT, Johns Hopkins, and Amherst, for example, have eliminated legacy admissions. Experience shows that eliminating legacies will in fact increase racial diversity. And after the Supreme Court's decision, 3 civil rights groups filed a complaint at the Federal Department of Education against Harvard, claiming that legacy admissions violate federal statutory law by discriminating against black, Hispanic, and Asian applicants in favor of less qualified white ones. Until that complaint is finally decided, we won't know for sure whether affirmative action programs in college admissions may continue for rich people who are disproportionately white. The Civil Liberties Minute is made possible by the ACLU because freedom can't protect itself.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. This day in labor history, the year was 1863. That was the day that draft riots broke out in New York City. The Civil War had been raging for 2 years. For the first time in United States history, the government instituted a draft lottery. But for those with enough money, they could buy their way out of the draft. For $300 or more than $5,000 in today's money, you could remove your name from the lottery. This meant that the city's working class men, many of them Irish Americans, had to fight while the wealthy could stay home. Anger in New York City mounted. The anger was stoked by anti-war newspapers and politicians. The newspapers railed against the war and the draft. They also riled up fears that more black Southerners would come to New York because of Abraham Lincoln's Emancipation Proclamation. Black men were exempted from the draft because they were not citizens. This further fueled anti-black anger amongst working-class whites. On the second day of the draft, violence erupted. First, the rioters targeted government facilities, but then they turned their wrath on black New Yorkers. White dock workers destroyed dance halls and boarding houses that served black patrons near the docks. A mob burnt down an orphanage for black children, but fortunately the children escaped. 11 black men were lynched. President Lincoln sent federal militia to New York to quell the uprising. After 4 days of violence, the official death toll rose above 100, but the true number is unknown. The Martin Scorsese film Gangs of New York dramatized the draft riots. To this day, class continues to be a major factor in who fights and dies on the battlefield.
Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show.
Thank you for accompanying us here to the Chef's Table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Metro Shrimp and Grits Thursdays, a little bit of jambalaya, a little bit of spice in your life. We always begin, whether from around the world, along the banks of the Rogue River and the Rogue River Valley of Southern Oregon on the west coast of the continental United States of America, where it is currently 63 degrees Fahrenheit. We are under a active heat advisory, by the way, though our highs are only expected to be in the mid-90s, which means it'll be bumping 100 here at the mothership. Sunny throughout the day with winds out of the northwest at 5 to 10 miles per hour. Clear skies overnight with lows in the mid to low 60s. Once again, not nearly cool enough overnight, but oh well. Winds out of the northwest at 5 to 10 miles per hour. Then sunny and hot tomorrow with highs around 100, which means it'll be a bit hotter here at the mothership. Winds will be out of the northwest at 5 to 10 miles per hour. Grass pollen remains high, rated high here in Rogue River. The air quality index for the region is in the good range at 18 parts per million, and that daytime UV index remains very high at level 9. Barometric pressure is falling at 30.08 inches. Visibility is up to 9 miles, and relative humidity is at 62%. Weather from around the world is brought to you by a crowd of crowdsourced weather stations that a crowd crowdsources from around the world, and that's why it's the Weather Underground, because it is. The weather station just outside city centre in London is registering 70 degrees Fahrenheit and cloudy. Paris is 75 and fair. Rome is 90 degrees and sunny with an active heat advisory. Kyiv is 85 and partly cloudy. Kabul is 80 degrees and clear. Hong Kong is 86 and fair. Tokyo is 81 and mostly cloudy. Sydney, Australia is 45 and clear. San Francisco, California is 56 degrees and mostly cloudy, and New York is 86 degrees Fahrenheit and sunny. And that is weather from around the world, brought to you by a crowd of crowdsourced weather stations that a crowd crowdsources from around the world. Gamotse Magome of the Associated Press brings us this first amuse-bouche here at the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy Metro Shrimp and Grits Thursdays. A former Mozambique finance minister who has been held in prison in South Africa for nearly 5 years was extradited yesterday, Wednesday, to the United States to face a fraud and corruption trial over a $2 billion scandal involving fraudulent government loans. South African authorities said that Manuel Chang, who was Mozambique's finance minister from 2005 to 2015, was handed over to U.S. authorities after his last-ditch effort to avoid extradition failed in May. He's scheduled to be arraigned today in U.S. District Court in Brooklyn. Chang's attorney, Adam Ford, said his client is relieved to have finally gotten to America where he can confront the baseless charges against him. He looks forward to his day in court and expects to be fully vindicated. Well, after 5 years in South Africa in prison, I would expect that too. I would hope for it at least. Back to the article at hand. It brings to an end a nearly 5-year legal battle by Chang to avoid facing trial in the U.S. and be extradited instead to his home country, where rights groups have protested that he would likely be treated leniently. He is accused of receiving bribes of up to $17 million during a scheme that secured loans for Mozambican state-owned companies from foreign banks and financiers for maritime projects. The money was looted through kickbacks and other dealings, according to U.S. prosecutors. The scandal caused a financial crisis in Mozambique when the IMF withdrew its support for the country after the so-called hidden debts were revealed in 2016. Chang was arrested at O.R. Tambo International Airport in Johannesburg in 2018 on a U.S. warrant. The Mozambican government's own attempts to have him face trial in Mozambique have been dismissed by several South African courts. In 2021, Swiss bank Credit Suisse agreed to pay at least $475 million U.S. to British and American authorities to settle bribery and kickback allegations stemming from their involvement with the corrupt loans.
Je te donne c'est mon amour pour la vie entière. La promesse de me trouver à tes genoux. Aussitôt que tu m'appelles, rester toujours fidèle. C'est tout, c'est tout. Je te donne tous mes printemps, mes étés de mer. Mais automne, quand les feuilles tombent partout, si ce n'est pas une bonne affaire, je te donne tous mes hivers.
Frank Bajak and Matthew Lee bring us this final amuse-bouche here at the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. State-backed Chinese hackers foiled Microsoft's cloud-based security in hacking the email accounts of officials at multiple U.S. agencies that deal with China. Ahead of Secretary of State Antony Blinken's trip to Beijing last month, the surgical targeted espionage accessed the email of a small number of individuals at an unspecified number of U.S. agencies and was discovered in mid-June by the State Department. They said none of the breached systems were classified, nor was any of the stolen data. The hacked officials included Commerce Secretary Gina Raimondo. The Washington Post reported, citing anonymous U.S. officials, export controls imposed by her agency have stung multiple Chinese companies. One person familiar with the investigation said U.S. military and intel agencies were not among the agencies impacted in the month-long spying program, which also affected unnamed foreign governments. In a technical advisory yesterday, Wednesday, and a call with reporters, the U.S. Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency and the FBI said Microsoft determined the hackers gained access by impersonating authorized users. Well. And that brings us to the end of our broadcast period for the day, but you do know Netroots Radio broadcasts on, and we will meet up here tomorrow for Blue Moon Spirits Fridays. So do stay tuned to Netroots Radio all day and all night for all the breaking news as it breaks, and we will meet up here tomorrow, right here in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma fleur sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, qu'il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte Goël. Je voudrais toujours te plaire dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je veux déjeuner par terre, comme au long de golfe clair, t'embrasser les yeux ouverts dans mon jardin d'hiver. Pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver.